on Zoom. Text number 179. So let me also share this on WhatsApp in case that's easier for you. So 179. There is many of these songs, or rather teachings, we do not have any explicit reference that tells us, when it was given and to whom. Unfortunately, we don't have such a record of Kyobpa Rinpoche's life and matching it up, with what was going on and who he was talking to and who he taught. This one, we can place it, but in a particular context, not even in this was said in the, when he was 42, or this is said when he was 57. But here, the title of the text, it says, a song sung when the Garlok and armies attacked in India. So this is referring to what Tibetans eventually heard about how an invading army from outside of India attacked. These are a branch of the Mongols who have, by that point, I think, intermarried with some, European powers, European people. So they're known as the Garlok in Tibetan. And it coincides with the time when an important Indian Buddhist master by the name of Shakya Shribhadra. If you look at the end of this song on page 2, it says, this was sung as the Garlok army made its attack in India, and Pandita Shakya Shribhadra arrived in Tibet. Shakya Shribhadra was important to, for example, Satya Pandita. I think he was, in fact, maybe even Satya Pandita's monastic preceptor, as in the one who gave monastic vows to Satya Pandita, an important Indian Buddhist master and scholar that came to Tibet. In the life story of Kyobpa Rinpoche, it said that when he was coming from India to Tibet, an arhat that came from Sri Lanka to pilgrimage in India gave Shakya Shribhadra 2 very special lotuses. I don't think they are like lotuses that you and I know, because apparently these 2 lotuses is very special, even magical, and said to Shakya Shribhadra that when you go to the northern mountains, the snowland, it is said that Nagarjuna, the great Nagarjuna, has reappeared in the land of snows. So if possible, I would like you to offer these 2 lotuses to the emanation of Nagarjuna. So it said that, long story short, Shaka Shribhadra realized that this is talking about Jigten Sumgön. However, they never met. It was only that he sent these 2 lotuses and offerings. It is said that there was an incident where Shaka Shribhadra's disciples in Tibet heard that there was a big offering to all monks that Jigten Sumgön was doing. And so they went to Drigong Valley, hoping to also receive some of these offerings. I think it was offerings of robes. And for some reason, there were some, human beings are human beings, even these disciples of great masters. These monks, for some reason, did not get the offerings that they were hoping. And so they got very upset, and they, in fact, got into some kind of fist fight with Kyobpa Rinpoche's students. So some kind of misunderstanding. And so it's said that these Shakya Shribhadra students beat up one of Kyobpa Rinpoche's students. Then, kind of miraculously, magically, Shakya Shribhadra otherwise would have clear vision of his idam whenever he practiced. But it is said that right after that happened, the idam did not appear. So Shaka Shribhadra knew something was wrong. And eventually, the idam appeared and said to him, this is because of the obscuration that arose, that your disciples assaulted Nagarjuna's disciples. And so this has become an obscuration for you. So that's one of the stories. Then regarding the Garlok story, there's also a story of how Jigten Sumgön himself might have emanated to India to turn back the Garlok armies. It is said that one day, Jigten Sumgön's disciples saw him kind of walking, kind of pacing back and forth, and holding his monk's staff. It's this stick with rings and an interesting design. I mean, you might have seen monks in a ritual way. This is supposed to be a monk's walking stick, and it has these rings that will make sound. Originally, it seems to be also a stick that will make sounds to kind of scare away insects, so that the monk won't accidentally step on them, or snakes or critters of all sorts. It's supposed to, but these days it's used more ritually. But it said that they saw Kyobpa Rinpoche holding his begging bowl and this, as if he was going on a journey. And he was walking, I think, back and forth in the length of this walkway in Drigong. And when people were puzzled, why he was walking back and forth. And then when asked, he said, I'm going to India to repel, to turn back the Garlok armies. And then again, months later, reports came from India that said that in the initial attack of the Garlok armies, the armies were coming towards Bodh Gaya. And when they got close to Bodh Gaya, before they were able to enter the city of Bodh Gaya, there was this fair-complexioned monk compared to Indians, so a foreign-looking monk that miraculously appeared and confronted the army and did some display of powers so that the army turned around and ran away. So then the disciples understood that, Kyobpa Rinpoche was doing some kind of display of his powers and turned back the Garlok armies. But in the end, the Garlok armies came back and succeeded in taking over northern India. And this song is, as we shall see, is basically Kyobpa Rinpoche singing about how we should not take for granted the refuge that we have in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So that the physical support for the existence of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha now is under attack. Now is no longer safe, meaning, right, all the holy places in India is on the brink of destruction. And so given this change happening, he's saying to his disciples, like, where is your true refuge? Buddha, Dharma, Sangha in our lives. We have to double our efforts, since the physical representations of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha in the Holy Land of India now is already gone, or threatened or destroyed by the Garlok armies. Yeah. So it's very heartfelt, this song. It's basically, probably you can imagine that finally again they got news. This is before, right, social media and technology. Months later they got news and said, oh, India has fallen. The barbarians have taken over. The Garlok armies have taken over. It's all finished now. Yeah. So it must be a lot of them are very sad, because India is, to them, this place, the source of the Dharma. Dharma was flourishing, Nalanda, all of that. And Nalanda got destroyed too. It said that Nalanda may be burned for 6 months, So here, this song, right? A song sung when the Garlok armies attacked in India. And so this is really good, especially like when things are really difficult. Yeah? When even the Dharma seems to be threatened, we should remember Kyobpa Rinpoche's instructions. Though the Muni, our protector, as in Buddha Shakyamuni, and the Gurus have taught that all appearances and existence are the Dharmakaya, and co-emergent with them, which is co-emergent with appearance and existence, are exalted qualities and activities. So Kyobpa Rinpoche says, so this is what Buddha and the lineage gurus have taught us. All appearance and existence, so nangsi, this expression in Tibetan, nangsi. Nangsi, depending on context, have a slightly different translation. And sometimes translated as appearances and potentials. Meaning, basically it's referring to, because nangsi sometimes is samsara and nirvana. Sometimes is, in this case, the translators chose appearance and existence, meaning the way things appear and the way they truly are. So sometimes nangsi can mean all of samsara and nirvana. Sometimes nangsi can mean appearance, the way they appear, and the potential for them to be something else. That means the aspect of change that exists even as things appear to us to be so clearly this way, but you never know, when the conditions change, they turn into something else. So it can also be translated as appearance and potentials. Yeah. In this context, it basically means Dharmakaya on the one hand, and appearances as well as their kind of deeper truth about them. Yeah? So you can say there's the surface truth, which is how it appears to each of us, and then there is the deeper truth about that. So that is the aspect of how things appear to us, how we experience things. And then it's saying this and Dharmakaya. This is Dharmakaya. In fact, if you recall, a famous expression from Gampopa that I've shared, he says, Namto Choku. Here, Namto is discursive thoughts, mentation, the process of the mind, whereby the mind is constantly minding, meaning, mind is always kind of perpetuating itself, the confused mind, Namto, discursive thinking, mentation. Namto is Choku, is Dharmakaya. Namto is Dharmakaya. So this idea of co-emergent is a very special technical term for Mahamudra, the way Mahamudra understand. So Mahamudra tradition says, this moment itself, this ordinary consciousness is the Buddha mind. This is a little bit different from, say, Dzogchen. Dzogchen emphasized the necessity to see the difference between these two states. So they say there is mind and there is primordial wisdom. And there's a clear line between the two. The meaning in the end is the same. Yeah, but the way it is handled is different. And I think it's important to appreciate this difference so that Gampopa's way of teaching Mahamudra, again, the term Mahamudra, depending on who's using it, also means different things. Yeah, Sakya Pandita uses Mahamudra, but his Mahamudra is way more tantric, so to say. Gampopa's Mahamudra, which is the Mahamudra that we Kyobpas inherited, is less explicitly tantric in nature. That Gampopa would use many sutra ways of explaining Mahamudra, which is actually one of the complaints of Sakya Pandita. He says that Gampopa is confusing his categories, that there is no such thing as Mahamudra in the sutra material. And Gampopa says, no, Mahamudra can be found in sutra material, can be found in Vajrayana, and can be found independent of both sutra and Vajrayana. So Gampopa used very kind of ordinary language to communicate, to teach Mahamudra, as opposed to very specialized tantric complexities, which the Sakyapas are very good at that. In fact, Sakyapas are really great at explaining Tantra. They would study the Indian tantric commentaries. Very kind of specialized field of study. And frankly, very few Kyobpas seem able to tackle that kind of material. So I say able, or you could also say interest in tackling that kind of material. The Kyobpas from Gampopa's time seem to be more focused on this more direct, using ordinary words, almost like Zen-like, you can say. There's a Zen-like quality. So no surprise, Sakya Pandita also branded Gampopa's Mahamudra, as he says, the Chinese heresy. As I've said, it has made like Kagyu descendants a little bit uncomfortable, when we say something like, oh, Mahamudra as taught by Gampopa resembles, what Chinese Chan or Zen also emphasize, Then when Tibetan Kagyu Khenpos hear that, they're like, no, we're not. That's because Sakya Pandita has accused Gampopa as, teaching the Chinese heresy. But, I don't know. I can definitely see using very simple, without getting into all this very technical language, and also like all the kinds of very forceful and deliberate ways of manipulating one's psychic body, an energetic body, to give rise to like what you call peak experiences, and then to like transform the mind in that way. Now, Milarepa definitely, used that in teaching his disciples. But it seems that Gampopa did not always use that way. Although himself, Milarepa used that, gave him that technique for him to finally realize Mahamudra for Gampopa. But Gampopa himself as a teacher did not necessarily make all his students go through that way. Gampopa used whatever was appropriate. That was, you can say, his level of realization. And this again, then it is said, Gampopa, in fact, is not just an ordinary person that turned up without anything to be trained by Milarepa. That Gampopa himself was a great bodhisattva that appeared during Buddha Shakyamuni's time. So anyway, here, this term co-emergent, and co-emergent with them, meaning co-emergent with appearances, are the exalted qualities and activities of the Buddhas. Which is to say, like, no matter how confused our minds sometimes, so much afflictive emotions, know that co-emergent means, know that in fact, it takes only a very slight shift of perspective, shift of understanding, that completely we will see that it's actually Dharmakaya. And not only just Dharmakaya, but the qualities and the activities of the Dharmakaya. So then it goes on. It is reasonable to ask, alas, what is to be done when we suffer from the abuses of a million forms of distress, pain, and hurt? He says, yes, on the one hand, Buddha and the lineage gurus have taught that appearances are Dharmakaya. And no matter how much seemingly confused samsara that you're experiencing, the Buddha qualities and the Buddha activities are right there as well. He said, okay, good. There are teachings like this. However, he says, kind of rhetorically, it is also reasonable to ask, But when suffering and all these abuses are happening, all these terrible things, what am I supposed to do? And he says, a mind obscured by the darkness of wrong views and ignorance is certain to have arisen from the belief in the self. So if right now we feel that we are under the power of wrong views and ignorance, it is because we have grasped onto the idea of self. And thus dream bees pollinate sky flowers. Dream bees pollinate sky flowers, meaning an illusory display of this and that comes about. As we are obscured by the mountains of the three obscurations, how could we ever perceive the three kayas of Buddhas? So in other words, don't fixate on this idea of self. Only by relinquishing, only by dropping fixation on self, can we see the three kayas, the true bodies of the Buddhas. So this first advice pertains to Buddha. Second advice pertains to Dharma. Even though gurus and Buddhas have taught that, quote, the Buddha's teachings shall never fade as they are in the domain of the lasting, blissful, and unchanging. So it has been taught, the Dharma, the essence of Dharma, it will never disappear. But then, Kyobpa says, in this current day and age, great peril abounds, great danger abounds. The power of foul beings flourishes and cannot be turned back. So now, specifically referring to the Garlok threat in India. These beings, they are flourishing and they cannot be turned back. The garlands of flowers of the three trainings are wilting. Training in ethical discipline, training in meditative concentration, and training in wisdom. These are wilting. These are declining. Beings with the three wisdoms are few and far between. Ignorant beings like myself are carried away by worldly ways, and so-called yogis intoxicate themselves with sense pleasures and drink. Alas, woe is me, or poor me. Where is the Buddha's teachings to be found? Then the answer. The victor's teachings are a boat with which to cross the ocean of cyclic existence. Yet the crocodiles of sense pleasures have us by our necks. The crocodiles have bit us by our necks. When will we ever reach the dry shore of nirvana beyond sorrow? Endeavor in practice with great diligence, my dear sons. That means don't get carried away by sensory attachments, sensory pleasures. The Dharma is something that we have to actualize in our life, in our experience. That indeed the environment is looking less and less conducive and friendly to our Dharma practice. But even that, it is up to us. We have to focus on practicing. Finally, the Lord of Sages, the Blessed Bhagavan, has taught that, quote, all sentient beings are fully pacified. The Sangha jewel will never cease. It is equal with the likes of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and has exhausted defilements and abandoned birth and death. This is praising the Sangha jewel, the true Sangha as an object of refuge. It's said that, in fact, when sentient beings have pacified their confusion, then that is the Sangha jewel that will never cease. But then next, though the truth of these words is of unsurpassed certainty, he says, though, these words are definitely true, yet if one does not extract the essence of the teachings through practice, how then is it that us samsaric beings are to be liberated? So he says, you should become the Sangha jewel. You have to extract the essence of the teachings through practice. And this in some ways is referring to the Hindu story, mythology, Indian mythology and story of the gods and demons churning the ocean in order to get the essence, the Amrita. So this story of Vishnu's and the Asuras and Devas, the time came for them to extract the nectar of immortality from this ocean. And so they turned Mount Meru upside down so that the pointed side of Mount Meru is down. And then they got a huge, gigantic snake as a rope, and they churn the stick, which is the mountain, for the nectar of immortality to come up. This story is very famous. Those of you who went to Borobudur, you remember? going into Angkor Thom, lining one side is the gods facing in. Lining the other side to the entrance is the Asuras facing out. So then the actual temple itself is like the cosmic mountain. So they are churning. Right? Also at the Suvarna Bhumi airport in Bangkok, right in the middle, there's this display of the churning of the ocean. So these are, Buddhist, Indian influenced Buddhist cultures, and this Hindu, what we call Hindu mythology, very much is a poetic reference. So here, it says, if you don't like extract, right, the essence. And so what is the churning? The churning is your practice. Then, how then is it that us samsaric beings are to be liberated? Be without attachment to your life, which is like a blistering wound, and engage in practice, just as the victor, the Jina, the one who is victorious over all confusion, has taught. Be the Sangha jewel yourself. Actualize those teachings in your own life. Then the Sangha will always be there. So this is how Buddha Dharma Sangha are not just refuge, objects of refuge out there, but they are to be realized and actualized in our own lives, especially when things get difficult, when things get challenging. So briefly, this is a song sung when the Garlok armies attacked in India. Any questions or comments regarding this?
What is the time frame that this all occurred?
Well, Kyobpa Rinpoche lived in
1100s?
12th century,
Yeah.
So 1100s, early, 1200s. He passed away in 1217. Yeah, so that's the time frame. And yes, Buddhist India is quickly disappearing. The height of Buddhist civilization in India is on the decline. And it's said that in part is because of that decline, and that there were more Indian masters making their way up to Tibet. And they've heard that Tibet is very Buddhist friendly. And so as conditions deteriorate in India, more and more headed that direction. Of course, when they got there, then they realized, oh my God, the climate is really very different from India. We're going to freeze to death. Yes, so, okay, we'll take a break and then we'll start Gongji.